As headmaster of the New International School of Thailand, it's a privilege for me to welcome you all to this very special NIST occasion. NIST has been a great supporter of the Bridges Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace, which is facilitated by the International Peace Foundation during the past few years. It has been a pleasure to watch the program grow and develop, and in particular, to see young people being able to share and learn from the wisdom that is extended to us by Nobel laureates and other distinguished visitors and guests to our school. These are people who have made major and significant contributions and differences to our changing world.
Your Excellencies, honoured guests, esteemed teachers and fellow students, as privileged members of the international community, rarely are we confronted by situations of a truly explosive nature. Today, we have the immense opportunity of being in the presence of someone who has been deep amidst a political upheaval that has dominated our nightly news for the past decades. His Excellency Professor Jose Ramos-Horta's political career began as early as 1975, having been appointed Foreign Minister in the Democratic Republic of East Timor government as proclaimed by pro-independence parties of East Timor. He would go on to be the international voice of the Timorese people following the Indonesian invasion of East Timor in 1975, becoming the permanent representative to the United Nations for the Timorese independence movement during his exile from 1975 to 1999. When appointed minister, Professor Ramos-Horta had only been 25 years of age. The youngest UN diplomat in history and an international figure for human rights, he was one of the three pillars in East Timor's struggle for independence. In 1996, he was a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize to, quote, honor his sustained and self-sacrificing contributions for a small but oppressed people. Following the Timorese independence in 2002, he would first become Foreign Minister and then Prime Minister by 2006. Prior to his appointment as Prime Minister, however, he was considered as a possible candidate to succeed former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, though dropping out of the race instead to serve his country. In 2007, Professor Ramos-Horta was elected as second ever President of Timor-Leste. As such, it is my pleasure and utmost honor to introduce to you one of the world's leading figures for modern peace, His Excellency Professor Jose Ramos-Horta. Thank you.
Good morning to you all. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I understand I'm not the first Nobel Peace Prize laureate to be here. I understand from Dr. Morowitz that you have been generous in welcoming at least some 10 Nobel laureates in different fields. It shows your patience in not giving up, listening to our sometimes not very inspiring comments. So that is already an extraordinary quality of yours in showing your patience, persistence in listening to successive visitors of the Nobel laureate group. I will talk only for 10-15 minutes and then will be very happy to answer questions or hear your own comments. I really don't know where to start, but maybe I will share with you a bit the developments in my own country. Because often the international media, particularly Western media, do not have the objectivity, the sensitivity to understand the dynamics, the realities in various countries, whether in Thailand, whether Timor-Leste, Indonesia. And we have been victims of sometimes extraordinary arrogance of certain Western media, sometimes extraordinary ignorance. So let me tell you the facts on the ground in Timor-Leste as I know them, as I live them, as I see every single day, almost 24 hours. And not from the perspective of certain journalists, sometimes don't even go there, or might be based there and yet don't even bother to learn to speak the local languages. So, what is the reality there today? It's a country of 1.1 million people, independent only in the 7 years. So it is not 70 years, it's not 100 years, it is 7 years. Born from an almost complete destruction in 99. The country was razed to the ground. Hardly any infrastructure, government building, school, private house stood. In only a matter of weeks, those who wanted to destroy the country before they handed it over to the United Nations to us did a thorough job. This is, and I'm talking about physical destruction. I'm not talking yet about the human suffering, the trauma of people living through violence and humiliation for generations. That a building, a school, a hospital, a bridge, you can rebuild within a matter of months or years if you have the money, if you have proactive leadership that want to do things. But to heal the wounds of people who saw so much suffering, all themselves victims of torture, of rape, it is a far more difficult process. And that is not only in East Timor, it can be anywhere. Next door to Thailand, you have a Cambodian, victim of genocide, more than genocide after World War II. So the new independent Timor in 2002 inherited ashes. The UN was there for 2 years, mandated by the Security Council, established a transitional administration in order to have, within 2 years, to have a new democratic independent state ready to be delivered to the Timorese. Well, either my friends in the UN Security Council, because I say friend because many of them were actually personal friends I knew for many years, others not so friends, but I knew them. And either they were influenced by some magic lady in their dreams, whereby you wake up in the morning, move a magic way, and a democratic modern state is created by the UN Security Council. Either that was their dream, a possibility, or they were under constraints. The Security Council had to deal with so many other demands around the world. Timor-Leste was not exactly, it was and is not exactly a major strategic location that would generate tremendous commitment in Washington and the other capitals. It did generate a lot of sympathy in the UN, the public civil society around the world. But the Security Council, every time they have to deal with a conflict situation and whether to send in a peacekeeping mission, a large UN mission to help managing the situation, they take into consideration political implications for them, but also money, funding. Because for every peacekeeping mission, the permanent 5, they are the ones who pay more accordingly to the agreed formula of how much each of the permanent members. And usually it's the United States that pays more for peacekeeping. And of course they are reluctant. So that's why the UN transition mission in Timor-Leste was 2 years to produce a democratic, independent, sovereign, functioning state within 2 years. And that's what we received on May 20, 2002, after only 2 years. Obviously, the UN was not able to do that. We received a skeleton, a sketch of a state. And I don't know how much budget this school has, but probably even more than our own state budget in 2002. $60 million, towards a bit of 60 million, less than 70 million were our state budget in 2002. Of course, there were also donor assistance for development. But what is, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but when you hear some countries or the UN saying we have spent $3 billion on Timor since '99, you should, and this I put it to you, students and teachers, when you hear that, you immediately should put them a question. And where exactly you put this money? On rural development, on support for agriculture, fisheries, on support for developing small-scale industries, on enhancing human capacity, training East Timorese in areas that are vital for the functioning of the administration. Have you built, helped them build roads, bridges, schools? Or you have spent much more money on yourselves, on the consultants, on endless missions to evaluate and to write report on recommendations. Well, they will be embarrassed. They will mumble an answer. But then if you further interrogate them, you will find out that whether in Timor-Leste or in many other countries like Afghanistan, no more than 30% of the entire foreign aid is spent in the country. 70% goes out. And that's why after years and years of so-called international assistance, whether Timor-Leste or other countries, or the international community has little to show. And then they blame the natives, quote unquote, for incompetence, for corruption, for mismanagement, and so on. In Timor, what have we attempted to do? Well, I can make it short because I want to move on to some other global picture. What we can say is that, well, it's a 7-year-old country. We had disputes, we had conflicts, we had violence. As you probably have read, February 11, 2008, I was shot by the same people with whom I was negotiating and with whom I created a relationship of trust, of mutual respect, to resolve that conflict peacefully without firing a single shot. What was the motivation of those who shot me? Only God and them know, and hopefully they will tell the court in the next few days or weeks when they go on trial. But that's its human mind. Sometimes our behavior is totally beyond comprehension. Since then, the situation has been much more peaceful. Even the common criminality rate is the lowest in the entire region, even lower than Australia and New Zealand, according to United Nations police reports. So don't, when you look at the Australian Embassy travel advisory, which advise Australians against traveling to Timor, or you hear the State Department travel advice, well, disregard it. I find it actually quite ironic because the other day for Christmas, New Year, the Australian ambassador in Timor, very competent, nice gentleman, had his daughter spending Christmas New Year with them in Timor. And the New Zealand ambassador came with his wife and 3 lovely kids. And there are 2 international schools there. I think one is an American, one is an Australian. A lot of foreign kids. And yet you hear those brilliant, those geniuses in the Department of Foreign Affairs in Canberra and those in State Department writing travel advice that even their own ambassadors in Dili are finding puzzle. Situation is very peaceful. The economy in 2008 raised a real growth of about 10%, according to IMF, International Monetary Fund. In spite of the international economic crisis, the fall of oil price, the policies of the government managed to really generate a growth of 10%. And you can see visible signs in the country, particularly in the capital, unfortunately more in the capital than the rural areas, but also in the rural areas, all poor people are seeing some tangible benefits of independence. We are overcoming the violence of the past, and I personally am very optimistic, hopeful that we prosper in the years to come. We have a reasonable abundance of natural resources like oil and gas. We have the best coffee in the world. And you, I don't know whether you are allowed to drink coffee in this school, but you should demand from the head of the school to provide you with Timor coffee. It's 100% organic and Arabica coffee. Even in UK, in the 50s and 60s, at the Buckingham Palace, Timor coffee was the official coffee served there. Princess Anne visited me 3 years ago, and I sent coffee through her to all her family. And I received a very kind note from Prince, I even don't know whether he's a prince or duke, the husband of the king, the queen, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Duke of Edinburgh, thanking for the coffee and how much he really enjoyed and appreciated it. So it comes from a very neutral source. Well, I was, like all of us, I was a teenager like you in high school. When I was in elementary school, from age 6 to 12 or 13, we had 7 years of elementary school in a very, very strict Catholic school where you have to pray, I don't know how many times a day. At least one mass a day, at least one confession to the priest a day. Even if you're 6, 7 years old, you have no sins, you have to confess something. Because the priest wouldn't believe that I didn't commit any sin, so I had to make up some sin. So I was in my best behavior when I was in elementary school. Then went to high school. Well, don't take me as a model. I cheat in school so often, fell in love with school teachers, felt miserable when they totally ignored me, even when I pretended I needed additional lessons, private lessons on math or physics. Well, it's a bit funny, it's a reality, but only to, I say, to tell you not to feel or believe that every Nobel laureate or every major international personality you meet in the world are people without flaws. Maybe His Holiness the Dalai Lama is completely flawless. I don't know what he did when he's in childhood as a teenager. Maybe Desmond Tutu, never committed a sin in his life. Mandela, I don't know, he was 27 years in Robben Island. I don't think he could have done too many things there. But when he was Only to illustrate, that they don't look up at the people believing that we all are perfect human beings. We are what we are, we succeed, we prevail against odds. Depends on each of us, on our dreams and our determination to realize our dreams. When I was asked many years ago from a young Timorese in Sydney, he was a son of Timorese refugees who resettled in Australia. I'd advise he would come and visit me sometimes when I started a program at the University of St. Wales in Sydney called Diplomacy and Human Rights. And the program is still going on, 17 years later, still running. I'm no longer much involved. But he would come and help with doing photocopying, and because he was bored at home, I knew his parents. And he asked me what my advice to him. My advice was study, study and study. Not to be good, not to be better, but to be the best. Set your goal highest. Not out of vanity, can be of pride, but bearing in mind that only with excellence in your preparation in lifetime, in your youth, you can serve others. Pride for your family, serve your village, your town, your community, your country and humanity, in whatever field you have chosen. That was my advice to him. I haven't seen him for a long time. I don't know what he has done since. But that's my advice to my Timorese compatriots. When people, the Jews, persecuted, discriminated, expelled, fleeing from countries for many hundreds of years, you know, the Jewish diaspora, the Jewish experience. Chased out of Europe from the Iberian Peninsula, some fled to other parts of Europe, others fled to North Africa, many even as far away as Asia. And they learned one thing: they can survive as a people, A, maintaining their identity, second, studying and restudying, using brain power. That's why they have survived. Their counterparts in the conflict in the Middle East, the Palestinians, also accounted among the people with the highest number of master's degrees and PhDs in the entire Middle East. In my country, that's what we are trying to do. The government, previous government, current government spend a high percentage of our budget on education. In the next few days, or already this is happening, more than 100 students from East Timor went to the Philippines to study there. We have 800 Timorese studying medicine in Cuba. A poor, impoverished country, victim of US sanctions, and yet provide almost full scholarship to Timorese students. 150 more in Timor studying medicine. In 5 years, 10 years, we'll have one of the highest ratio of a doctor per 10,000 in the world, in the region at least. Education is what also the bridge for people's understanding of each other. Because the conflict you see around the world often happen because of ignorance. So education is, in my view, the bridge to peace. Is peace possible in our world? To conclude my reflection, my remarks, the theme that was offered to me in this series of talks in Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia is peace, lasting peace, possible, a realizable dream? Well, if you ask His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whom I know and like him a lot, he probably would daydream and tell you, yes, it is possible. I would say yes, maybe possible, but maybe in 100 years, in 1,000 years. Unfortunately, we human beings, from the moment we were born, we were created, we began fighting each other, for whatever reason. And that's how you explain many conflicts going on right now. After the experience of World War II, when millions and millions were slaughtered, we thought we would have learned. But immediately after World War II, the Korean War happened. North Korea, supported by the then Mao Zedong in China, invaded South Korea, lasting several years, more than 1 million people killed. Then the United States, paranoid about the expansion of the then Soviet Union, began gradually and then faster to move into Vietnam. More bombs were dropped on Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, than on the entire European continent during World War II. More than 1 million people killed. What was the purpose of it all? When the US had to leave in 1975, and then a few years later, under President Bill Clinton, normalized relations with Vietnam. And Vietnam did not change. It's still a communist regime, the same regime that the US and the United States opposed, and for which more than 1 million people paid their lives. And today, Vietnam is a relatively prosperous capitalist society, controlled by still a communist regime, but with a capitalist economic approach. The list goes on of conflicts around the world since World War II. Is there possibility of an end to many of these conflicts? Yes, here and there, I believe it can be resolved. Next door to you is Myanmar. The challenge is to ASEAN, particularly now to Thailand, as it presides over ASEAN for the next year. I believe with patience, with diplomacy, it can not maybe resolved during Thai chairmanship, but can sow the seeds for dialogue and resolution of the Burma problem. Can there be a resolution short term of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians? Well, the current situation makes me extremely pessimistic. The more violence you use on a people, the more resistance you create, more hatred, and it makes the whole dialogue even more difficult. But we must not give up. The youth, yourselves, your compatriots around the world, who have many years ahead of you, where you can dream and work towards attaining your dream. You are an extraordinary force for peaceful changes in the world. Joining hands with millions around the world, we can achieve in your lifetime a better world, particularly for those in regions of conflict. I thank you and God bless you. Happy to answer your questions.
Okay, so now we will proceed with some questions. Whoever has a question, please raise your hand and then stand up and ask the question to our guest speaker. Okay.
Professor Horta, Ramos-Horta, you mentioned at the start of your speech extraordinary arrogance / ignorance on the part of Western media. Could you give some more specific examples and details?
Okay, more specific example. Well, actually, yesterday I received on my BlackBerry one email from a friend forwarding to me a story by, I don't remember the name of the gentleman, but a correspondent of Associated Press. I don't know where he was writing for. I don't have my phone here, otherwise I pull out and tell his name. And where he says things like, make a number of sweeping judgments about how Timor is completely, basically bankrupt, wasting money from the oil fund, and showing ignorance about even our constitutional and institutional processes. That the president authorized a budget that later was considered illegal by the Court of Appeal, and that the President, the Prime Minister, Speaker of Parliament wanted to fire the head of the Court of Appeal. Well, the gentleman is quite unserious and dishonest, because he didn't even bother to find out what happened to the President of the Court of Appeal. He is in Portugal since August. He went on holidays. Then was supposed to return in September. Has not returned because of very precarious health. He has been in intensive care in the hospital. Our government sent medical team to look into his situation, talk with the Portuguese doctors, and say at least till March he's not able to return. Under our constitution, nothing is said about how long the head of one of the tops, we call organs of sovereignty, the parliament, the government, the president, or the Court of Appeal, can stay out of office. It doesn't say. But if we look at precedent in other countries, it's a no more than 3 months. The Court of Appeal, whom I appointed, the president whom I appointed, and they respect him, the Timorese, although he grew up in Portugal, was a respected judge in Portugal. Well, he's out of the country. By March will be 6 months. So, and he has not been fired. We are struggling with this dilemma, what to do. So, but the gentleman didn't bother at all to look into these facts. The president approved the budget sent to him by the parliament. If I disagree, if I have major disagreements, I do not sign, goes back to the parliament. The parliament can override my veto with a 2/3 majority vote. There has been absolutely no reason whatsoever for me to veto a budget. What the government of Mr. Xanana Guzmão did was, in hindsight, extraordinarily timely. What was considered unconstitutional by aspects of it by the court was a special fund that the government created called Economic Stabilization Fund, $240 million, separate from the budget, making that fund available so that in case of emergency, unexpected development, it can go and get money. And it was timely. The economic and the financial crisis came, the food prices came, and the government had to intervene in the market. Well, if you listen to the World Bank and IMF and all those geniuses, that advise us, they would advise us not to touch the petroleum money. Save it for future generations. That has been their slogan. Well, I have said to the previous Prime Minister and to this current Prime Minister, we have more than $4 billion in US Treasury bonds that give us next to zero in return. Our policies remind me of what my great-grandmother used to do. She was a poor native East Timorese in a village somewhere in Timor. She would hide the money under the mattress. She didn't even have a mattress. It was a bamboo mattress, I call it. In Tetu, it's called hadak. Well, that's where she would hide her money. 20 years later, that money was worthless because it was even out of print already, out of circulation. Are we going to accumulate money in the petroleum fund? 20 years from now we'll have maybe $20 billion, but the real value of that $20 billion purchasing power will be at least 50% reduced, if not more. And we still don't have roads, we still don't have educated people, we still have not eliminated malaria. So I've argued, do we want to have people in 20 years from now who are better health, better educated, prosperous? Do we want really to help future generations? Well, invest now. And that's what we try to do. And that seems to be very shocking to the World Bank and other international authorities, to the AP journalists. And what else? I told the previous Prime Minister, who was less sensitive to my arguments. The current one is an extraordinarily sensitive human being. I said, it is immoral that we have that much money in the petroleum fund in New York, while there are thousands of people who don't have even $1 a day to eat. So I advocate for a long time, get money out of the petroleum fund and make cash distribution to the poorest. And this does not come out from a crazy individual. I'm not an economist, but I wonder, with so many economists around the world, many Nobel laureates in economics, how come we end up in this huge international financial economic crisis? Sorry, I'm no longer going to listen to economists. I'm going to listen to my brains and my heart. So, what we decide to do? And but I actually consulted with a friend, Professor Stiglitz, Nobel Economics, Columbia University, and another friend in London School of Economics, Andrew Shelton, young Australian professor, 28 years old. They agree, this is the way to do it. They argue for more. They argue about, I think, $40 a person. The government is giving $20 a person, those age 60 or over, or are handicapped, etc., etc. And all of these find the brilliant journalists from AP call it mismanagement, wasting the money, and so on. So this is one specific example of insensitivity, arrogance, ignorance.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Hello, Professor. I was just wondering, how did you go from your high school years to becoming the youngest UN diplomat? Like, what made you want to get involved in politics?
Well, accident of history. Yeah, because before 75, in 73, I was hoping to do further studies in media, particularly cinema, television, because I wanted to be a film director, doing film. I was already a TV correspondent back then in Timor, radio, print media, and that was my ambition. But then, suddenly, one day, April 25th, 74, we hear the news, the Portuguese Empire collapsed, the dictatorship gone. I said, what am I going to do now? Still live in the country, because I was going to leave, actually. We decided to, I decided to stay with other colleagues at the time, to struggle, to seize on the opportunity to lead Timor towards freedom, towards independence. But that whole process lasted no more than 2 years. December 4, 75, I left the island in a special plane that was allowed to fly from Australia to Timor, to take me to Australia and then on to Lisbon and then to New York. I was going there to advocate our case before the UN Security Council. I arrived there in almost my short sleeves in December 75. You can imagine winter in New York. Had never seen snow in my life. The only thing similar to snow was in Christmas tree in Timor, where the priest may put a white cotton ball on the, it look like winter. That's the most I knew about snow. And my first meeting in New York was the then Soviet ambassador to the United Nations, Mr. Yakov Malik. He was already ambassador since San Francisco, the founding of the UN in 1945. So it was one afternoon, probably he had a big lunch and a lot of vodka, and I was talking, he was falling asleep. And because I just coming out of Timor, very timid, I have heard of Yakov Malik. First time ever I faced such an important person. And as he was dozing off, I was also talking even more softly. Almost like a mother talking to the baby to put him to sleep. Because I thought, well, my mother teach me not to wake up people when they sleep. But also, I was afraid that if I talk too loud, he'd wake up, he's upset with me, and he would not support us. So that was my first diplomatic experience. And, then stuck in New York for the next 15 years, that's when I lived in New York, traveled all over the US, then Latin America, Africa. By 1990, I moved to Sydney, Australia. But from there I continued to travel around the world lobbying for our cause. My only inspiration or motivation was my sense of justice and loyalty. Not to betray those who sent me out of the country in '75 with a mandate to represent them. Every time I was tempted to find what some people in New York tell me, just say, why don't you find a real job? And a real job meaning, get a job somewhere, 9 to 5, and marry, have kids, a white fence on the suburban house, and buy one of those machines to mow the lawn. That's perfect family situation. Well, even if I was sometimes tempted by that, always the voice of justice, of loyalty, of those who put trust on you. And so I went on and on as much as I could. Not alone. I had many, many Timorese colleagues who would say, the foreign minister is here, he's younger, but he was also involved. Our ambassador in Bangkok, much younger also, he was a prisoner in Indonesia, studied in prison. And Mr. Constantio Pinto, I don't know if he's here today, he was a student leader, put in prison, managed to escape. We managed to get him to the United States, where he studied at Brown University, later at Columbia University, and then became our chargé d'affaires in Washington, D.C. for many years, until he was called back to Timor by the foreign minister. So many other East Timorese abroad did tremendous work to get the country free.
Thank you.
Could you elaborate on the financial crisis, the effect of the financial crisis on Timor-Leste?
Financial crisis of Timor-Leste?
That's affected the whole world. Okay. What's its effect on Timor?
Well, if I were President Barack Obama of the United States, first thing I would do would be to order the police, whoever, go and arrest every single executive in Wall Street and all the others around the United States. Extraordinary, they have shown so much greed, irresponsibility. Over the years, as I read, how much those people were paid, and if their contracts terminated for some reason, even for negligence in conduct their part, they will get 40 million, 100 million package compensation. We were lectured year after year by American diplomats, American officials about transparency, good governance, and so on. So when I hear some of these comments coming from my good friend Ambassador Hans Klem in Dili, he's a very good man. I said, excuse me, what are you talking about? Are you referring to the United States? And the situation is of such magnitude that one capitalist country after another, United States, UK, and everyone, start intervening, controlling banks, buying of banks, doing things that Fidel Castro did for 50 years, and for which he was invaded and ostracized, or Hugo Chavez doing in Venezuela. We thought this, nationalizing, intervening in banks and all of that, only Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro would do. Well, George W. Bush just doing that. Well, it is tragic for many Americans and for many wealthy people who trusted them. But for us, in Timor, we haven't felt the consequences. Why? We are, unfortunately, mostly an importing nation. We import almost everything that we consume. We don't produce yet enough rice for our needs, only 30%. Under this government, with this government policies, maybe in 5-10 years, we could be completely self-sufficient. So it means that our import bill this year, 2009, is going to be much lower because prices went down, going down everywhere. Rice, for instance, that we bought ourselves, we bought 6 months ago for $1,000 a ton. Now we can buy for $300. So we will save a lot of money. We export oil and gas. 60% is oil, light crude, and 40% gas. This is part of a deal with Australia, joint exploration of the Baikundar field, where we get 90% of upstream and Australia gets 10%. And of course, our oil revenues will be less, but we have more than $4 billion saved. So we can maintain the economic growth of last year, we can maintain it this year. So I believe Timor will be one of the few countries that can escape this international economic financial crisis.
Thank you.
What do you believe is the one most important quality of an individual as a political figure other than leadership?
For me, a test of leadership, besides obviously many attributes that you must have in terms of being minimally intelligent and all of that, is compassion. For me, no greater quality, no greater requirement for good leadership than being a compassionate person. A leader has to have a golden heart. If he does not, if he thinks only with his head and not with his heart, for me, he's not a true leader. So for me, you can have a brilliant politician with all degrees, very professional, very efficient, but if he doesn't have a compassion, sooner or later he will come down. He will fail.
You mentioned earlier in your speech that Jews have been oppressed during and after World War II. But now, since Israel is sort of oppressing the Palestinians in Gaza, do you feel that Gaza should be granted autonomy and should be able to be free of the trade blockade that was imposed on them by Israel and also be free like Timor-Leste?
There is no debate or question or controversy today in the world in regard to the right of the Palestinian people to a viable, independent state. 10 years ago, 20, this notion was still not acceptable to Israel, and the United States also never explicitly ever supported a viable Palestinian state. Situation evolved in the last, particularly since Camp David in the 90s, but more so the last 10 years, with the unanimity. There has to be a viable Palestinian state. But when we talk about viable Palestinian state, we mean really viable in the sense that West Bank and the Gaza, which are separate territories, have to have a conditions for the two territories to actually exist. Within West Bank and Gaza, there has to be conditions for the people to really feel free, for the economy to prosper. And the difficulty is Jewish settlements. Israel vacated Gaza, that was good. But in West Bank looks like a Swiss cheese in terms of, Israeli settlements everywhere. Extremely difficult for Israel. Israel did, and with courage, and Ariel Sharon did, really physically evicted Israeli settlers from Gaza. And that's what I think was unfortunate. Israeli Palestinian leadership was split and did not seize on that. And it was only Ariel Sharon who could do it. Because of his conservative background, his authority, his credibility. And yet, there was the international community, Palestinian leadership, I think failed to seize on that opportunity. The more serious problem for the Palestinians is precisely this split in the leadership. President Mahmoud Abbas is in West Bank, Hamas is in Gaza. They are divided and ever. You might even see the possibility that Gaza remains completely separate from the West Bank. So that is a problem for the Palestinians. In our situation, in many other popular resistance movements, there have been situations like that where the movement is so divided that it becomes totally ineffective. Second problem is the use of violence. As I said earlier, the more Israel uses force against Palestinians, for whatever reason, Israel might be right in wanting to retaliate. What has been the lesson of the last 50 years when you use violence on the Palestinians, on the people? But for the Palestinians, the lesson also should have been drawn by now. Have you achieved anything through violence since Munich? Yes, out of desperation, hopelessness, Palestinians started international hijacking with Munich. And what has been the result since? Well, so the two sides probably should have a courage of real leaders to talk. Sometimes I have to tell you, even in my own experience, in my country, it is so difficult to get people to show humility towards each other, to sit down and talk. Very difficult. In the case of Palestinians and Israelis, now even more difficult than ever. consensus that there has to be, it's a matter of justice, it's a matter of fairness, that this injustice for the Palestinians must end. The killing must end, the camps must end. And then you have this dilemma. I don't want to be in the shoes of Palestinian Israeli leaders or the UN and others who deal with the Middle East problem. The right of return. Jews anywhere in the world are eligible to Israeli citizenship. Wherever you are, you can go to Israel, have all the benefits of Israeli citizenship. How about the right to return of Palestinians? That is taboo for Israel. How can you resolve this? I have no answer.
Yes, sir. To what extent do you think that global warming will be in the way for the development of peace?
So it's a real problem for the next 20, 30 or 50 years. It is not alarmist, even in my own country. In 2003, I was foreign minister in a retreat of our cabinet. The issue was not part of my portfolio, but we were just 1 year independent. I asked the cabinet colleagues, the Prime Minister, do we have a policy, a strategy, program on water preservation, on land preservation, on reforestation? They all look at me and surprised why the foreign minister will be talking about that's not his portfolio. Well, no one answered. The meeting moved on to other issues. Many years later, we still face the problem with increasing loss of forest in my country, increasing population. We have one of the highest population growth in the world, 3.4%, I think, population growth, 7 children per family. If this trend continues, in 20 years, our population will be 3 billion. What is the effect on the land, on water, on forest? And this happens in many other parts of the world. The current government is conscious of the problem. I personally have argued again and again with donors to please pay attention to this problem. Hopefully we will reverse the deforestation of our country.
Also, if any teachers would like to ask questions, please feel free to do so.
Mr. President, could you please elaborate on Timor-Leste's current diplomatic and economic relationships with Indonesia and whether reconciliation has been reached following the previous conflict?
I'm glad that you give me a chance to talk on this subject. I would say our relationship with Indonesia, Timor-Leste and Indonesia, should be a model to be emulated by every country in the world that had a past of conflict. We have today the best possible relationship between the two countries. Not a single case of animosity among Timorese towards Indonesians. There are still many thousand Indonesians living in Timor. Even when we were killing each other in 2006, not a single Indonesian was touched, or any foreigner for that matter, except a poor Brazilian missionary who happened to be in the wrong place, wrong time. People didn't know who he was. They thought he was part of another gang. And because he was dark, he speak Tetu language. But other than that, there was not a single case of anyone chasing foreigners, let alone Indonesia. Our border between East Timor and Indonesia is safest. Even when there was chaos in the capital, the border was safe. And it is not our side that guards the border, actually. You know, if it were dependent on us, anybody could walk in and out, because our poor border police have no means whatsoever. It's the Indonesian side that actually does their job for us, controlling very well their side of the border. Indonesia has been one of the most, together with Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, advocates of our membership in ASEAN. We still have many thousand Timorese students studying there. And many people, particularly Amnesty International and very few Timorese human rights activists, crucified me and the Prime Minister and other leaders for not wanting to push for an international tribunal on Indonesia because of the past crimes committed by Indonesian army in Timor-Leste. Even when I was foreign minister, and today as president, I said, anyone who wished an international tribunal on Indonesia better find a different foreign minister, find a different president. I will not do it. Past is past. We are free. We were freed in '99 because Indonesian themselves also liberated themselves. If the Indonesian students, Indonesian people had not gone to the streets and oust the then dictator Suharto, we would not be free. So, and then they began a process of very difficult transition to democracy. Those of you who know Indonesia, you know the enormous challenges they face. Should we, on the Timorese side, instead of concentrating in healing the wounds within ourselves, normalize relations with Indonesia, we will invest energy in creating an international tribunal that would exacerbate the situation in Indonesia, create backlash against us. And the Indonesian side appreciated our sense of state, our sense of maturity, responsibility. President SBY, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, soon after he was elected, the first foreign country he visited was to East Timor. And when he was there, thousands of people spontaneously came to the streets to wave to him. So that is, as I say, is a model of relationship that could happen between Korea and Japan, Japan and China, France and Algeria, and many other conflict situations where 50 years later there is still profound resentment towards each other. Even in our now school curriculum, we have thousands of pages of testimonies of what happened in Indonesian occupation. We are going to put this in our school curriculum, but we will be extremely careful so that the school curriculum that contains ugly truth of the past does not become a tool or instigation to perpetuate resentment towards Indonesia. It will be more of a pedagogy on the problem issue of violence, and not on blaming A, B, or C. We cannot deny our history. It is there in the many thousands of pages, years and years of testimonies done by our National Commission on Truth and Reconciliation. We cannot ignore that. We have to teach our children and society about what happened, but in such a way that it is part of our reconciliation, healing process, and conflict prevention.
Thank you, Mr. President.
This will be our last question.
Professor, if there was a particular governmental system or economic system, is there one that you particularly admire or would like Timor-Leste to pursue in the future?
Sorry, can you repeat? I didn't hear you talk so fast.
I'm sorry. Is there a particular governmental system or economic system that a current country possesses that you would like Timor-Leste to pursue?
Well, there are many successful case studies Singapore is one of them. Out of nothing, 40 years ago, there was even talk of then failing state from very beginning, meaning economic superpower. Dubai, out of the desert, making good use of the oil and gas, is a wonder. Or Costa Rica, in Central America, not much resources, but possessing no army, very peaceful, and has the highest per capita income in Central America, and one of the highest per capita income in Latin America. Or the Cuban model. No illiteracy in Cuba, no malnutrition.
Professor, to what extent do you think that global warming will be in the way for the development of peace?
The best probably healthcare education system anywhere in Latin America. But is the political system the best one for us? Well, I have to say, I don't want to be president for 40 years. That's so that I can guarantee. So I wouldn't want a political system that perpetuates me for the next even 10 years. I think it's already too long. My point is that I think there are very, very good success stories in many countries. Some you take some examples to follow. We have 300 Cuban doctors helping us in Timor, real missionaries. They work in areas where Timorese doctors don't even want to go. They earn very little. They live with the Timorese people. And I think the Cuban doctors deserve a Nobel Peace Prize for the past 40 years of what they've been doing around the world. An impoverished country. And yet they have 35,000 doctors in more than 40 countries in the world, completely at their expense. In Timor, we just give them, I think, some credit for their phone. I think $100 a month or something like that. And our telephone is so expensive, they try to call Cuba, well, the $30 value of the card in only 3-5 minutes gone. And they have a very, so we take good examples from different countries. And we're building based on our reality. And I think we are doing well, reasonably well. Many of those who are skeptical, criticize us today, will be surprised and regret in 5 years from now. And today we can see the signs of it in Dili, the improvements in very short period of time, thanks to a very good leadership in the Prime Minister, Mr. Sharana Guzman.
His Excellency enjoys a very well-earned glass of water, I'd like to at least try to express our gratitude for what's been an exceptional morning. One of the things that we often learn from these lectures is that self-effacement is a key part of being a successful leader or leader in a field, and it's been by far not in any way an uninteresting lecture. And I know you started by saying that patience was a virtue. It's been, the time has flown by, and I think as I've been sitting listening, making some notes, the dialogue has flown between personal history, biography, political history, so many different things that I think I would like to go away and just allow to settle and consider a little bit more. But in particular, I'd like to just mention a few things that I've taken from His Excellency's dialogue with us today. The first is a welcome one, and that's about coffee. because some people here may know I made a commitment to drinking less coffee. Unfortunately now, if I fall away from that, I now have two of the possibly greatest excuses for drinking more coffee. One is that the incumbent president of Timor-Leste has recommended that I drink more coffee from that country, and also if that doesn't work for principle, I can maybe draw on that. That was perhaps more of a trivial one. The idea that we can all have flaws and that we are all people, but that doesn't stop the pursuit and the passion for achieving something at an ideological level, I think is a very, very important thing for us all to hear and to really think about. When the professor mentioned some of the realities in Timor-Leste, particularly in terms of development and aid, the idea that we can have lots of activity but not necessarily having the impact that activity intended is, I think, something we can go away in all our lives and reflect on. That we can seem to be doing things to help, but if we aren't really considering what the impact is, then perhaps we've got it wrong, we have to reassess that. So the idea of impact. The idea of idealism but also pragmatism. I think from what I have heard today and from what I know of you, yours has been a life devoted, as you mentioned, to the ideological and long-term pursuit of peace, but at a pragmatic level. And I think understanding that peace is something that is passed, or the pursuit of peace is passed from generation to generation. The challenge to take from you and for the people who are making a real difference in the world at the moment, that challenge to achieve it long term is something that I think individuals, students like yourselves, should try not to lose when you become adults, and when it's traditional for you to lose that idealism. So that was great. The last thing that I'd like to do is just to recognise that in a life so busy, you've managed to commit personal time to a visit such as this, which is an exceptional opportunity for us. I think that in itself, speaks volumes for your compassion, the other big strand that came through your dialogue with us. So thank you for finding the time. We really do appreciate that this is an exceptional opportunity. And before I have my cup of coffee, can I just ask you all once more to show your appreciation?
Cigarettes, you always have a warning, say, harmful to health. The Timor coffee, of course, is not harmful to health, it's very good. But, in fairness to everybody, I have to say, it has a strong Viagra element in it. You can drink it, but very diluted.
I'll be passing this on to someone more senior than myself in the school. We also have a very small, and it generally is a token of our thanks and our gratitude for such a fantastic visit. And I'd like to present that now to His Excellency. So, thank you very much. Now, my understanding, I think, now is that the entourage is going to leave. Is that correct? No. Okay, yeah, for lunch. Okay. So I'd like to ask the audience if you could please remain standing while His Excellency and our honoured guests leave, and then we'll direct you afterwards. Thank you very much.